My fellow Americans, what I'm about to share with you isn't just a policy proposal, it's a revolution. Donald Trump just unveiled what might be his boldest plan yet, completely eliminating the federal income tax. Think about that for a moment. The same system that's been draining your paycheck since 1913, gone, replaced with tariffs, just like our founding fathers intended. The establishment is in absolute panic mode. And when you hear the details, you'll understand why. Now, check this out. Are you listening? Our country's national debt has surpassed $35 trillion. The U.S. is borrowing just to pay back the interest that we owe, further deepening us into a hole. Meanwhile, gold has surpassed $2,400 an ounce. Smart money is shifting out of paper to promissory notes into what the Constitution says should only be deemed as real money, gold and silver. So if you have funds sitting in a low-interest bank account or 401k IRA retirement account, you need to call my friends at Global Gold Investments, America's leading conservative precious metals dealer, and receive absolutely free their new 2024 Protect Your Wealth and Retirement Guide. The number's right there. You see it on the screen, 888-700-4148. Mention Next News and receive their 5-star customer treatment along with a complimentary portfolio analysis. Operators are standing by. Call that number, 888-700-4148, or visit IRAGoldproof.com. Remember, if you don't have gold, then you don't have wealth. All right, friends, we are just 12 days out from the most consequential election of our lifetime. Early polling right now shows that Trump is leading in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin by points, multiple points, a hair. It's a big deal. Okay, Arizona 50-48, for example, right there. Now, this is the big news of the day. Even the New York Times putting out this headline, Trump flirts with the ultimate tax cut, no income taxes at all. Now, if you know me, if you know any of my earlier activist work, you know that I worked with Aaron Russo. Aaron Russo was one of the first major Hollywood stars, Hollywood players to call for the end of the income tax, the end of the IRS, along with Congressman Ron Paul. I've got some clips here to take us back about, with Aaron Russo talking about the IRS, even part of his interview with an IRS commissioner from his movie, America, Freedom to Fascism. I wouldn't be sitting in this chair if it wasn't for Aaron Russo. Let me just make that very, very clear. So, Health Ranger, he says, Trump's getting closer to my suggestion, end all federal income tax, all personal income, period. Now, of course, we know that Trump has already talked about ending tax on tips, ending tax on overtime, ending tax on Social Security. Well, why not just throw it all out? No tax on anything. Trump considering ending all federal income taxes, replacing them with tariffs. If he does this, he will go down in history as the greatest president since George Washington. David Harris Jr., who I met again at Mar-a-Lago on Tuesday, he posted this. Everyone needs to watch this clip of Trump talking about eliminating the federal income taxes, some guys in the Bronx. Watch how captivated they are. Let's go back to that moment, and then we're going to deconstruct some more reaction on this announcement.
No, there is a way. With all this extra revenue we're going to be bringing into the country. So do you believe at some point in time we could find a way, once the country's back on its feet and getting enough revenue and paid off our debt, do you think it's possible to find a way to eliminate federal taxes?
There is a way.
And how do you feel about it?
In the old days, when we were a smart country, in the 1890s and all, this is when the country was relatively the richest it ever was. It had all tariffs. It didn't have an income tax.
Yes, sir.
Okay? Now we have income taxes, and we have people that are dying. They're paying tax, and they don't have the money to pay the tax. No, in the old days, 1890, 1880, we had so much money, they had to set up committees, blue ribbon committees, how to spend our wealth. We had no idea how to spend it with so much money. Then we went to the income tax system, and the rest is sort of history. But no, there is a way. I mean, if what I'm planning comes out, it's a great question, by the way.
Everyone could attain the American
sophisticated cat, you know.
Everyone could attain the American dream if it wasn't for the high cost, the burden of high taxes, and we're taxed at every step of the way.
Yeah.
When we make it, when we spend
regulations.
it.
And regulations. So I cut more regulations in 4 years than any other president by 4 times. Yeah, let's go.
So that was when he was in that Bronx barbershop. And now the idea is percolating to the surface. Peter Schiff, 3 hours ago, he said, now real Donald Trump is advocating eliminating the income tax, completely replacing it with tariffs, which was how the federal government was funded prior to 1913. In fact, the 16th Amendment was ratified precisely to replace tariffs on the middle class with income taxes on the rich. However, in 1913, the federal government spent less than 2% of GDP. Today, it spends over 24% of GDP. It's impossible to fund the massive federal government we have now with the indirect tax system we had then. If Trump wants to return to the tax system we had prior to 1913, he would need to eliminate all government programs enacted since then. That would really make America great again. Well, I think he's on his way. Where should we go? Well, let's hear Donald Trump talk about tariffs with Dave Ramsey. It explains the whole income tax versus tariffs, and then we're going to go to Aaron Russo. Now, I firmly believe that this man right here on your screen, Aaron Russo, the late Aaron Russo, this was filmed shortly before he passed away, and Aaron Russo, he was my mentor, he was my friend, and before he passed away, he said, Gary, I need you to take this message and run with it. And that's what we've been doing ever since. We had a website called restoretherepublic.com. It was like a Facebook clone. We were organizing patriots. It just became too much to manage. And then when the election came around, the 2012 election came around, we got behind Ron Paul. We were already behind Ron Paul in 2008. And then with Aaron Russo in his film, I firmly believe that if it wasn't for Russo, we wouldn't be seeing Donald Trump in the White House today, because the messages that we're seeing from back then, from Aaron Russo to Ron Paul to the Tea Party to the Ron Paul Revolution to the Ron Paul campaign, moving forward, it really created this groundswell of populism that I do firmly believe started with Aaron Russo and Ron Paul. So now let's take a look at this. This is Aaron Russo discussing the IRS and the Federal Reserve System.
Right? Now, so then in 1913, they bring the Federal Reserve System into being. Right? And now you have this Federal Reserve System, which then in 1913 got the right to create money for the government. When before that, the government created its own money. Now the government, when it needed money, had to borrow it from this private bank called the Federal Reserve, which is a private bank owned by individuals, incorporated in Delaware. And so what happens is now the government borrows money from them to fund the government. Then the government says, well, we have to pay these people interest. How are we going to pay them interest? Let's impose a tax on the labor of the American people, which never existed before, to pay the interest to the bankers.
In fact, in 1980, Ronald Reagan said not one red cent of your income tax money goes to run the country. It all goes to the Federal Reserve. Well,
it was the Grace Commission report that said that not one nickel goes to the infrastructure of the country. You know,
I guess Reagan quoted that. Then,
right, so. And so, but the point I'm trying to make is that by creating this Federal Reserve System, the government now became dependent on these private banks for money, and they started taxing us. You see, and so now what happens is that in 35, I believe it was, Social Security started. And they gave Social Security cards, said not to be used for identification, the Social Security number right on the card, right? And through Social Security, they started deducting money out of your paycheck. That was the first time they were ever could take money out of your paycheck, because people agreed to it because they thought it was going to their retirement fund. And so then when they instituted the income tax again, they started taking money out of your paycheck because Social Security could do it. And then they could do it again. You see what I'm saying?
And so now they've even taken control of the tax payment itself. I mean, literally like you're a slave, they're
right.
Taking it right there when you make it.
Exactly.
They don't even trust the public enough to go
send them a check.
Themselves, you know?
Right. So they take it out automatically because they know people aren't going to want to pay it. So what's happened is that through the implementation of the Federal Reserve System, the government has become vested in these bankers, and they get their money from the bankers. And so then they impose a tax on us, which makes us more slaves, makes it more difficult for us to survive, right? Giving them more profits. And now what's happened is that through the Federal Reserve System, the bankers have pretty much taken control of our government. It doesn't matter Republican and Democrat anymore, because they're both the same. Neither one of them are talking about shutting down the Federal Reserve System or stopping the payment of taxes, or any of the big issues that face Americans, right? So I had a friend, Nick Rockefeller, okay, who was one of the Rockefeller family, and he, when I was running for governor in Nevada, he came to me, introduced himself to me through an attorney, and we became friends. We started talking about things, and I learned an awful lot from Mr. Rockefeller. And one of the things that we used to talk about was the ultimate plan of the banking industry, what they wanted to accomplish. And the goals of the banking industry, not just the Federal Reserve System, but the private banks in Germany and England, all over Italy, all over the world, they all work together. They're all central banks. And they're all part of the Communist Manifesto. Central banking is one of the major planks of the Communist Manifesto. We talk about America being a capitalistic country, but yet at the same time we have a central bank that plans everything for us, right? And the graduated income tax is another plank of the Communist Manifesto, right? So right there you have two major planks of the Communist Manifesto that have been brought in because of the Federal Reserve System, okay? So the ultimate goal that these people have in mind is the goal to create a one-world government run by the banking industry, run by the bankers, and they're doing it in sections. The European currency, the euro, and the European Constitution is one part of it. Now they're trying to do it in America with the North American Union, right? And they want to create a new currency called the Amero, right? And the whole agenda is to create a one-world government where everybody has an RFID chip implanted in them. All money is to be in those chips, right?
So Russo goes further. We've also got, and again, I owe my entire existence to this man, and God rest his soul. There's no question that he was put on this earth for this very moment. And we're seeing Donald Trump start to enact these visions that we have been fighting for so long. I've got some more on Aaron Russo. That you need to see his film America, Freedom to Fascism. Came out back in 2007, I believe it was. So it's an older film. You can find it on YouTube. You need to watch it, but it lays out the whole plan. And it featured Ron Paul. And in that moment, it featured Ron Paul. It featured Ron Paul and really put Ron Paul on the map nationwide. He was just a little Texas congressman with some big ideas, and Aaron Russo helped amplify those ideas that we're seeing Donald Trump start to put into play.
I want to send a clear message to every boardroom, every executive suite across America. If you scam your customers, exploit your employees, pollute our environment, or rip off taxpayers, we will find ways to hold you accountable.
That was Hillary Clinton earlier today in Toledo, Ohio, slamming Donald Trump, saying he's not releasing his tax returns because he hasn't paid any income taxes, and the New York Times story basically points to that. However, my next guest says that's not illegal, but the U.S. having even an income tax is. He's former presidential candidate, former Republican Congressman Dr. Ron Paul. He's with me now. How is the income tax unconstitutional?
Well, it was ruled unconstitutional during the Civil War period because there was no explicit authorization for it. Then they came along with the 16th Amendment trying to give it the authority, and some people will argue about that. And it's also argued on whether the 16th Amendment was legitimately passed. But let's assume that's never going to change. The real unconstitutionality of the tax code and the income tax is the way they collect it, because it is assumed you're guilty until proved proven innocent, and that turns the Constitution on its head. So it's a method of collecting revenues in a very unconstitutional fashion. I remember in one presidential debate, one of the Republican candidates was sort of lamenting, about half of the people don't pay any income tax. And I said, we're halfway there, because really, if you're living in a free society, the founders didn't intend that if you had the proper size government, there would be no income. The real problem with the income tax is the assumption is made that the government owns you, controls you, and controls 100% of your income, but permits you to keep a certain percentage if you obey the rules and fill out the forms and make yourself vulnerable to everything the government does. But in a free society, you should have, in the natural rights, you own your life, you ought to own all the fruits of your labor, and the whole country would be better off if we had a tax system like that.
Dr. Paul, the attitude is that the U.S. government owns everything that you earn. That's the attitude. And you point out the IRS is, you're right, that you're guilty until proven innocent. There's no, due process, really. The IRS does try to, settle tax disputes, but it's really tough, and it's so arduous. And, the issue of fair share, Hillary Clinton really trying to, double down hard on this. The U.S. tax system is already really progressive. 2/3 U.S. households get more in government benefits, and they pay into the system in taxes, rather. It isn't progressivity. I think you've said Karl Marx would love the U.S. tax code, how progressive it is.
Marx designed it that way. His second plank is a progressive income tax. His fairness business is a bunch of baloney, really, because what they're saying is if you don't pay your fair share, then you're not participating. But how is it fair that the government arbitrarily says it's fair that if you take something from one group who are productive and give it to another group because maybe they're on the take from a government contract and doing some useless things? And we do complain about the welfare state taking from one and give it to the other. And I, at one time in my life, believed welfare was food stamps, But welfare goes to big corporations very frequently. And if you put the military spending and all the other things involved, it's a very unfair system. So for Hillary to say it's unfair for somebody not to pay more of their hard-earned dollars to an unfair government and a political system that's there just designed to take care of the special interests.
Yeah, Hillary keeps talking about fair share, Dr. Paul, and people out there are saying, well, what about Solyndra, right? All the money blown on green energy policies wasted there. Where are the shovel?
So this argument has been going on with the green energy and all that, but I'm so happy to see that this is finally like we're in the last days of this election, and this is a huge development. But again, it has deep roots, and I'm taking you down this memory lane, if you will. My personal involvement with this man, Aaron Russo, and Ron Paul, and the Ron Paul revolution and the campaign, it's very dear to my heart, you guys. You don't even understand how much this means to me to see this. I'm sorry, I don't mean to get broken up, but this is the interview from his film, Russo's film, America, Freedom to Fascism, from back in 2007. He's sitting down with the IRS commissioner, a former IRS commissioner. And Aaron told me that this movie would not have been made if this interview didn't happen. This interview was an absolutely critical part of the film. And I'm going to share some of it with you right now, but I want you to make sure that you write down the name of that film if you haven't seen it yet, and look it up on YouTube. It should still be there. But here is a portion of that.
Not mandatory.
And former chief counsel, all those guys, I think, can answer your question about, where in the tax law it says that you have to pay taxes.
Wow, good news, I thought. So I called Sheldon Cohen because he used to be the IRS commissioner. He wrote the tax code, and he was also general counsel to the IRS. He is a true expert, and I couldn't find a better person to answer my questions. He graciously agreed to my interview. The reason I'm doing this documentary is because there are many people in America today who believe that there's no law that requires them to pay an income tax or file a 1040. And there are many people going to jail for it, fighting over it.
The Internal Revenue Code is authorized by the 16th Amendment.
I think it should be clarified. I think government should be transparent to the people. Why doesn't the IRS commissioner sit down with them and just explain it in clear English? Why?
I don't think they really care. They don't think. I think they're just playing word games.
You don't think they're sincere people? You know?
No, I don't think they're sincere people.
What does voluntary compliance mean?
And why does the IRS code say it's voluntary to comply, not mandatory?
That's a word euphemism we use. We use voluntary compliance when we talk about traffic signals. Most people at 2 o'clock in the morning, do you stop at a red light?
Yeah.
Is there a cop there?
Well, sometimes I don't.
Well, I do, and most of us do. Most of us do.
Right.
But that's voluntary compliance.
That was a complete perversion of logic. Traffic laws state that it is mandatory to stop at a red light. The IRS code says it's voluntary to comply. Mandatory and voluntary are the complete opposite of each other. Yet he wants us to believe that they mean the same thing.
Your income tax is 100% voluntary tax, and your liquor tax is 100% enforced tax. The situation is different.
So can the government criminally prosecute somebody of information put on their 1040?
Yes.
Right, so doesn't that violate the Fifth Amendment?
No.
But the Fifth Amendment says I don't have to do anything that incriminates myself.
Well, it doesn't incriminate you to put your income down.
But you said before I could be put in jail for it.
The commissioner wants us to believe that although the IRS demands that you fill out the 1040 and you can go to jail for it, that they are not violating your Fifth Amendment rights of self-incrimination. That is absurd.
Isn't it true that the word income is not defined anywhere in the Internal Revenue Code?
The law says that the government has a right to tax income from any source derived.
So, but the word income is not defined in the code. It just says income without a definition of what income is.
That's right.
Correct?
Yeah.
But there are many different kinds of taxes. Well, how can an American citizen know what income is if the code doesn't define it? If they're paying an income tax...
Because the courts have all defined it.
Do you remember what constitutional attorney Edwin Vieira said?
The definition of income in the Constitution was given in the Eisner versus Macomber case, and it turns on gains or profits that are made from some activity.
So the Supreme Court has ruled income is not wages, it's not labor, it's gain from corporate activity.
I believe that a man's labor is his private property.
That's your view, but it's not the law.
The Supreme Court's even said your labor is your private property. When I go to work for somebody, it's a trade. It's an even exchange. I do some work, you give me some money.
So this interview goes on and on to the point where the former IRS commissioner throws his hands up and quits the interview. Okay, so you need to find this movie. You need to go watch it because it sets the ground for everything that's happening right now with Donald Trump and this headline today from the New York Times. Trump flirts with the ultimate tax cut, no income taxes at all. And he gets it. As he said in that barbershop, as he said in that sit-down interview. So, my friends, things are changing, and they're changing for the better. And right now, we're seeing Donald Trump with the polls, and he's just blasting past Kamala Harris, and they are terrified. And add this to the top of the list. You know that the powers that be in Washington, they need the income tax to keep you in line. And if Donald Trump makes good on this, because let's see, he is the chief executive. Is there a mechanism that he could abolish the IRS with a stroke of a pen? Or is there more congressional legislation that has to be gone through? I don't know what the process would be to get rid of the income tax altogether. I mean, he's already talking about no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. What's the mechanism to execute that vision? That's what my question is. So Again, there's a lot of backstory to this. This is a conversation that's been had for a long time, going back to the days when I'd be marching in the streets with my bullhorn and my burned DVDs, passing out copies of films that are revealing these truths. And now it's part of the national dialogue, and I couldn't be happier. I mean, of course, I was happy when I saw Ron Paul bringing it to the foreground in his 2 campaigns. But when we have Donald Trump, a man of his stature, in his third presidential campaign, leading in the polls, days away from an election, man, this really warms my heart. So patriots, this is not just about taxes. It's about returning to the vision that our founding fathers had for America. Trump is talking about a complete reset of how our government operates. No more IRS, no more income tax, just fair trade and America first. But here's what I want to know from you. Is America ready for this kind of revolutionary change? I think it's overdue, personally. But share your thoughts below. Let's talk about what this means for our future and yours.